The coffee shop hummed with the kind of comfortable noise that made loneliness louder. Margaret Chen sat by the window, her laptop open but untouched, watching the Saturday morning foot traffic blur past the glass. She'd ordered a latte 20 minutes ago and hadn't tasted it yet. The foam had long since collapsed into itself, leaving a thin film across the surface that caught the light like oil on water. She was 42 years old, successful by every measure that mattered in boardrooms and quarterly reports, and she couldn't remember the last time someone had asked her how she was doing and actually waited for an answer. Her phone buzzed. Another email. Another decision that apparently only she could make. Margaret reached for it, then stopped, her hand hovering above the screen. Through the window, she watched a father and daughter cross the street, the little girl's hand tucked safely in his. Something in her chest tightened. She pulled her hand back and picked up the latte instead. Cold now, she drank it anyway. 3 tables away, David Morrison was losing a battle with a chocolate croissant. His daughter Emma, 7 years old with her mother's dark curls and his own stubborn chin, had already devoured hers and was eyeing his with the focused intensity of a general planning an invasion. "Dad, you're getting crumbs everywhere," Emma said, trying not to giggle. "That's because croissants are scientifically designed to explode," David replied, brushing flakes off his faded flannel shirt. "It's a French conspiracy." Emma laughed, the sound bright enough to turn a few heads. David felt the familiar warmth spread through his chest, the same feeling he got every time he made her laugh. It was harder these days, 2 years after the divorce, when most of their Saturdays were just the two of them trying to make ordinary moments feel special enough to fill the gaps. He worked construction during the week, came home tired with sawdust in his hair and calluses that caught on Emma's clothes when he hugged her. Money was tight. Time was tighter. But Saturday mornings at Baker's Corner had become their ritual, the one thing he protected fiercely from overtime shifts and exhaustion. Emma finished her hot chocolate and swung her legs under the table, her light-up sneakers blinking red and blue. She was looking around the coffee shop with that curious expression she got when her mind was working on something. "Dad," she said, her voice taking on that particular tone that usually preceded questions he didn't know how to answer. "Yeah, sweetheart? Why is that lady sitting all by herself?" David followed her gaze to the woman by the window. Mid-40s, maybe. Well-dressed in that effortless way that spoke of money. Good coat, expensive-looking scarf. The kind of leather bag his ex-wife used to screenshot from magazines. She was staring at nothing, or maybe at everything, with an expression he recognized from his own mirror on the hard days. "Some people like being alone," he said carefully. Emma frowned, considering this. "She doesn't look like she likes it. She looks sad." David watched the woman take another sip of what was clearly cold coffee. Emma wasn't wrong. There was something in the woman's posture, the way she held herself so carefully still, that spoke of someone trying very hard to take up as little space as possible in a room full of people. "Maybe she's just thinking," he offered. "About sad things, probably." Emma was already sliding out of her chair. "We should ask her to sit with us." "Emma, wait." But she was already moving, weaving between tables with the fearless confidence of someone who hadn't yet learned that the world could be unkind. David grabbed his coffee and followed, his heart doing that thing it did whenever Emma decided to befriend the universe. Pride mixed with anxiety, hope tangled up with the certain knowledge that he couldn't protect her from every disappointment. Margaret sensed the movement before she heard the voice. She looked up to find a little girl standing beside her table, all wild curls and light-up shoes, watching her with enormous dark eyes. "Excuse me, ma'am," the girl said, polite but direct. "Can you sit with us? You seem lonely." The words hit Margaret like a hand pressed to a bruise she'd been pretending wasn't there. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Behind the girl, a man approached, 30-something, tired eyes, wearing work clothes that had seen better days. He had his hand slightly extended, ready to steer his daughter away, but he was watching Margaret's face with an expression that held no judgment, only a kind of gentle waiting. "Emma," he said softly, "you can't just—" "I'm not bothering her, Dad. I'm inviting her." Emma turned back to Margaret. "We have an extra chair, and my dad always says coffee tastes better with company." Margaret looked at the girl, then at the father, then back at the girl. Something in her throat felt tight. When was the last time someone had simply wanted her company? Not her signature, not her expertise, not her money, just her presence at a table. She started, then stopped. The father was already shaking his head slightly, mouthing an apology, beginning to guide Emma away. And Margaret surprised herself by saying, "Actually, that would be nice." Emma's face lit up like every Christmas morning at once. "Really? Really?" Margaret closed her laptop, picked up her dead latte and stood. Her hands were shaking slightly. How ridiculous, she thought. How absolutely ridiculous to be nervous about joining a child and her father for coffee. But she followed them anyway. David held the chair for her. A gesture so automatic his hands moved before his brain caught up. The woman, she hadn't offered her name yet, settled into the seat with the careful precision of someone used to boardrooms and negotiations. "I'm Emma," his daughter announced, already claiming the social space with the ease of the very young. "That's my dad, David. We come here every Saturday. What's your name?" "Margaret." The woman's voice was softer than David expected. Professional, measured, but with something fragile underneath. "Margaret Chen." "That's a pretty name," Emma declared. "Are you having a bad day?" "Emma," David said, but Margaret was already shaking her head. "It's okay." She looked at Emma with something that might have been the beginning of a smile. "I'm having a lonely day." "There's a difference." Emma nodded sagely, as if this made perfect sense. "My dad has those too. He thinks I don't notice, but I do. He gets really quiet and stares at his phone like it might explode." David felt heat creep up his neck. "Thanks for that, kiddo." But Margaret was looking at him now, really looking, and he saw recognition in her eyes. Not of him specifically, but of the feeling. The particular weight of carrying everything alone. "I'm sorry," he said. "Emma's got a habit of adopting people. Last week it was the mail carrier. Week before that, the librarian." "They were both nice," Emma protested, "and they both seemed like they needed a friend." Margaret's expression softened. "You might be right about that." A waitress came by, and Margaret ordered a fresh latte. Emma immediately launched into a detailed explanation of why hot chocolate was superior to coffee, citing evidence that included marshmallows, taste, and the fact that grown-ups always seemed grumpy after drinking coffee. David watched Margaret's shoulders slowly drop from around her ears. She was listening to Emma with genuine attention, not the glazed-over politeness adults usually gave to children's monologues. When Emma paused for breath, Margaret asked a real question about Emma's hot chocolate preferences, and Emma beamed. "Do you have kids?" Emma asked, with the bluntness of 7 years old. Margaret's face did something complicated. "No," she said quietly. "I don't." "Oh." Emma processed this. "Do you want some? Kids? I mean, because my friend Zoe's mom is always saying how kids are a blessing and a trial, but mostly a blessing. Well, except on Tuesdays. Zoe has soccer on Tuesdays and her mom says that's mostly a trial." "Emma," David interjected, "maybe we should let Margaret drink her coffee." But Margaret was almost smiling now, a real smile that changed her whole face. "It's fine, really." She looked at Emma. "I used to think I'd have kids, but life went in a different direction." "That happens to my dad too," Emma said. "He wanted to be an architect, but now he builds houses instead. He says it's close enough." David rubbed the back of his neck. "You're just full of fun facts about me today, huh?" "It's true, though," Emma said reasonably. "You showed me your old drawings." "The ones from college." Margaret looked at him with new interest. "Architecture. Long time ago," David said. "Different life. Construction pays better anyway. More steady. It was a lie, sort of. Construction paid the bills, kept the lights on, made sure Emma had what she needed. But steady was a generous word for the constant hustle of finding the next job, the next contract, the next way to make sure his daughter didn't feel the weight of how hard he was working just to keep them afloat. Margaret nodded slowly. She understood something in that. He could tell. The way dreams got traded for necessities. The quiet reshaping of a life around what mattered most. Emma, oblivious to the undercurrents, had moved on to describing her school's upcoming art show. She was painting a family portrait, she explained, and she'd added their dog even though they didn't have a dog yet, because her dad said maybe next year, and she wanted to manifest it. Manifest? Margaret asked. Mrs. Roberts taught us that word. It means making something real by believing in it really hard. David caught Margaret's eye and shrugged. Second grade is very spiritual these days. Margaret laughed. Actually laughed. The sound surprised all three of them. They talked for another hour. Or rather, Emma talked, and David and Margaret listened, occasionally catching each other's eyes over Emma's head with expressions of shared amusement. It felt easy in a way David hadn't experienced in months, years maybe. He learned that Margaret ran some kind of consulting firm. She was vague on the details, clearly trying not to sound like she was bragging. He learned that she worked too much, slept too little, and couldn't remember the last time she'd had a Saturday morning with nowhere to be. She learned that David was doing his best, that Emma was his whole world, that he measured success not in promotions or raises, but in moments like this, when his daughter's laugh could fill a room. When Emma excused herself to look at the pastry case, "Just looking, not asking, Dad, I promise." Margaret leaned forward slightly. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For letting her invite me, for not being weird about it, for..." She gestured vaguely at the table. The coffee cups, the morning light slanting through the window. "This," David smiled. "Emma's got good instincts about people. If she thought you needed company, she was probably right." Margaret looked down at her hands. "I have a corner office on the 43rd floor. I have a staff of 60 people. I have more appointments in a day than most people have in a week. And this is the first real conversation I've had in months." She met his eyes. "How pathetic is that?" "Not pathetic," David said. "Just honest." Emma returned, reporting that the lemon bars looked amazing, but she was too full. And could they maybe come back tomorrow? David said they'd see, which Emma correctly interpreted as probably not, and which Margaret noticed with a small flicker of understanding. Margaret checked her watch. Expensive, David noticed, the kind that cost more than his truck, and stood reluctantly. "I should go. I have I was going to say I have work, but that's not actually true. I just usually go into the office on Saturdays because I don't know what else to do with myself." "Don't go to the office," Emma said immediately. "Offices are boring. You should do something fun instead." "What would you suggest?" Emma thought hard. "The park? The library? We're going to the library later. They have a thing where you can pet rabbits today." Margaret looked at David, something hopeful and uncertain in her expression. "Rabbits?" "Yeah," David said. "Some kind of educational program. Emma's been talking about it all week." "Could I?" Margaret stopped, looking suddenly vulnerable. "Would it be weird if I tagged along? I promise I'm not some kind of... Yes!" Emma grabbed Margaret's hand. "You have to come. Mr. Whiskers is going to be there. He's the biggest rabbit. He's basically the size of a cat." David found himself nodding before he'd fully thought it through. "You're welcome to join us. Fair warning, though. Emma's going to want to hold all the rabbits, and you might get volunteered for holding duty." Margaret's smile was real now, reaching her eyes. "I think I can handle that." The library was a 10-minute walk, and Emma filled every second with questions. Where did Margaret live? Did she like rabbits? Had she ever had a pet? What was her favorite color? Did she think Mr. Whiskers would remember Emma from last time? David walked beside them, hands in his pockets, watching his daughter's absolute lack of social anxiety with a mixture of pride and concern. Margaret was keeping up, answering each question with patience, and David noticed she'd relaxed even more, her careful posture giving way to something more natural. The library's community room had been transformed into a small petting zoo. Volunteers supervised as children carefully held rabbits, guinea pigs, and a very patient tortoise named Sherman. Emma made a beeline for the rabbit enclosure, already charming the volunteer into letting her hold the infamous Mr. Whiskers. Margaret stood back, watching with an expression David couldn't quite read. "You okay?" he asked. "I haven't done anything like this in 20 years, she said. "Maybe longer. I'd forgotten what it feels like to just—" She gestured at the room, the children's laughter, the gentle chaos of it all. Exist without an agenda. A volunteer approached them holding a small brown rabbit. "Would you like to hold Cinnamon? She's very gentle." Margaret looked panicked. I've never—" "I'll show you," David said. He took the rabbit first, demonstrating the proper hold, then carefully transferred her to Margaret's arms. "Just support her back legs. Keep her close. She'll let you know if she's uncomfortable." Margaret held the rabbit like it was made of glass. Cinnamon, true to her reputation, settled immediately, her nose twitching against Margaret's coat. Something in Margaret's face transformed. Wonder, maybe, or the kind of joy that came from something simple and unexpected. "She's so soft," Margaret whispered. Emma appeared beside them, Mr. Whiskers cradled like a baby in her arms. "Look how big he is, I told you." They spent an hour there. Margaret held 3 different rabbits and laughed when the tortoise tried to eat her shoelace. Emma gave a full report on each animal's personality, including detailed theories about their hopes and dreams. David took a picture of Emma with Mr. Whiskers and caught Margaret in the background, holding Cinnamon, looking more peaceful than he'd seen her all day. When it was time to go, Emma made David promise they could come back next month. Then she turned to Margaret. "Will you come too? Mr. Whiskers would want you to." Margaret's eyes went bright. "I'd like that, if it's okay with your dad." David found himself saying yes before analyzing all the reasons he probably shouldn't. Single dad, clearly wealthy woman. Different worlds entirely. But Emma was already hugging Margaret's leg, and Margaret was looking at his daughter like she was something precious, and David thought maybe different worlds could overlap for a few hours on a Saturday. They walked back toward the coffee shop where Margaret had left her car. The afternoon had turned golden, that particular autumn light that made everything look like a memory even while it was happening. "Thank you for today," Margaret said. "Both of you. I didn't realize how much I needed." She stopped, searching for words. "Company. Real company." "You're welcome to join us next Saturday," David said. "Same time, same place. Emma will never forgive me if I don't extend the invitation." "It's true," Emma confirmed. "I'd be very disappointed in you, Dad." Margaret smiled, but there was something sad in it now. "I'd like that. I don't know if I can promise every Saturday. My schedule is complicated," David finished. "I get it. Just show up when you can." They reached Margaret's car and David's eyebrows went up despite himself. He didn't know much about luxury vehicles, but he knew enough to recognize that Margaret's Mercedes was worth more than he'd make in several years. She saw him notice and looked embarrassed. "Company car," she said, which they both knew was only partial truth. Emma, oblivious to the sudden tension, was already asking Margaret to bend down so she could give her a hug. Margaret crouched, and Emma wrapped her arms around her neck with the fierce affection of a child who decided someone was worth keeping. "See you next Saturday," Emma said, like it was a certainty. "See you next Saturday," Margaret echoed, holding on just a moment longer than necessary. David watched her drive away, the Mercedes slipping into traffic with the quiet power of expensive engineering. Emma took his hand, swinging their arms between them. "I like her," Emma announced. "Yeah," David said. "Me too. She's lonely, though. We should help her not be lonely." David looked down at his daughter, this small person with a heart bigger than seemed anatomically possible. "We'll try, kiddo. But some people's loneliness is complicated." "Everything's complicated with grown-ups," Emma said wisely. "But you still have to try anyway." Margaret sat in her car for a full 5 minutes before starting the engine. Her hands were shaking again, but for different reasons now. When was the last time someone had hugged her like Emma just had? Without wanting anything, without agenda, just pure, uncomplicated affection? She pulled out her phone and opened her calendar. Saturday mornings were usually blocked for gym sessions she never attended or work she didn't really need to do. She deleted the next 4 Saturday appointments and typed in a new entry. Baker's Corner, 9 a.m. Then she drove home to her empty townhouse and made herself dinner for the first time in weeks instead of ordering in. It wasn't much, just pasta and salad, but she ate it at her table instead of standing at the counter, and she didn't check her email once. Small victories, she thought, but victories nonetheless. The following Saturday came with rain. David almost texted to cancel. Emma had a slight cold, nothing serious but enough that he worried about taking her out in the weather. But Emma had been asking about Margaret all week, and when 9 o'clock rolled around, she was already in her raincoat, boots on, ready to go. They arrived at Baker's Corner to find Margaret already there, sitting at their table by the window. She'd ordered 3 hot chocolates. "I wasn't sure you'd come," she said when they sat down. "The weather takes more than rain to stop Emma," David said. Emma sneezed, and both adults looked at her with identical expressions of concern. Emma rolled her eyes. "It's just a tiny cold. I'm fine." They fell into conversation easily. Margaret asked about Emma's week at school. Emma reported on her spelling test. "Perfect score, thank you very much." And the ongoing drama of who got to be line leader. David added details Emma forgot, and Margaret listened with the kind of attention that made Emma bloom. After coffee, they braved the rain to visit a bookstore Emma loved. Margaret bought her 3 books without asking David first, and David had to work to keep the discomfort off his face. He appreciated the gesture, but the casual way Margaret spent money that would stretch his budget for weeks highlighted differences he'd been trying not to think about. Margaret must have noticed something in his expression, because she pulled him aside while Emma was distracted by a display of bookmarks. "I'm sorry," she said. "I should have asked. I just saw her face when she was looking at them, and I didn't think." "It's generous," and David said carefully. "Really, but Emma needs to understand the value of—" "You're right, I overstepped." Margaret looked genuinely distressed. "I'm not good at this. I don't have kids. I don't know the rules." David softened. "There aren't really rules, just maybe ask next time and you don't have to buy her affection. She already likes you." "I'm not trying to buy anything," Margaret said quietly. "I just wanted to see her smile." David believed her. He could see it in her face, the lonely woman who'd found something precious in his daughter's easy affection and didn't quite know how to handle it. "How about this?" he said. "You can buy her 1 book today. We'll call the other 2 early birthday presents. Her birthday's in 2 months. Margaret's face lit up. "She'll let me come to her birthday? I think she'd riot if you didn't." The weeks fell into a pattern, Saturdays at Baker's Corner, sometimes followed by the library or the park or the bookstore. Margaret started showing up in jeans instead of designer clothes, her hair in a ponytail instead of carefully styled. She laughed more, talked less about work and more about the things that mattered. A book she was reading, a memory from childhood, questions about how to make friends as an adult when you'd forgotten how. Emma adored her. David found himself looking forward to Saturday mornings with an intensity that worried him slightly. This wasn't sustainable, he told himself. Margaret would get busy. She'd remember she had a whole life that didn't include coffee with a single dad and his 7-year-old. The novelty would wear off. But she kept showing up. 6 weeks in, on a crystalline November morning, Margaret brought her laptop to the coffee shop. David raised an eyebrow. "I thought Saturday was your day off now." "It is," Margaret said, "but I have something I want to show you. Both of you." She turned the screen around. On it was an architectural rendering, a house beautiful and modern with clean lines and large windows that seemed to bring the outside in. "What do you think?" she asked David. He stared at it. The design was sophisticated but warm, practical yet elegant, the kind of house he used to dream about building back in architecture school. "It's beautiful." "Where is it?" "Nowhere yet, it's a proposal. I bought land upstate last month. I've been talking to architects, but none of them quite understood what I wanted." Then I remembered what Emma said, about you wanting to be an architect. David's heart started beating faster. "Margaret, I'm not offering charity," she said quickly. "I need a house. You need work. And from everything Emma's told me, you're good at building things, so I thought maybe you could at least consult. Help me find someone who could—" "Dad could build it," Emma interrupted, having been listening to the whole conversation with great interest. "He's really good. He built me a treehouse and everything." Margaret looked at David. "Could you?" David wanted to say yes. God, he wanted to say yes. The chance to actually design something, to use the degree gathering dust in a folder somewhere, to create instead of just execute someone else's plans. But the reality crashed down immediately. "I can't take that kind of time off regular work," he said. "I've got bills, responsibilities, Emma's school, insurance, everything else. A project like this, it would take months. And I don't have a portfolio, not really. You should hire a real architect." "You are a real architect," Margaret said. "You just haven't had the chance to be one. It's not that simple." "Why not?" David looked at her, this woman who'd wandered into their lives 2 months ago and somehow become essential to their Saturdays. She genuinely didn't understand. When you had money, things were simpler. You could take risks because you had a safety net. You could follow dreams because failure wouldn't mean choosing between rent and groceries. "Because I can't afford to fail," he said quietly. Margaret was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "What if you couldn't afford not to try?" She made him an offer that evening. Over dinner at a family restaurant Emma chose specifically for its unlimited breadsticks. Margaret would pay him what he normally made in construction, plus a little extra, to design and oversee the building of her house. She'd hire the crew. She'd handle the materials. All David had to do was create something beautiful and make sure it got built right. "Why me?" David asked. "You don't even know if I'm any good." "Emma thinks you are. I trust her judgment." "Emma thinks everyone is good at everything." "Not true," Emma said through a mouthful of breadstick. "I think Tommy Henderson is terrible at sharing, and I've told him so." Margaret smiled. "I've seen your treehouse, David. Emma showed me pictures. It's clever, well built, and designed with real thought for how a child would use the space. That tells me you can design, and you've been working construction for years. That tells me you can manage a build. So yes, I trust you. The question is whether you trust yourself." David looked at his daughter, who was watching him with those enormous dark eyes that saw right through every excuse he could make. He thought about the drawings in the folder at home, the dreams he'd carefully packed away when life got complicated, the constant voice in his head that said this was all he could expect, all he deserved to reach for. "Okay," he said. "Okay, I'll do it." Emma cheered. Margaret smiled, something relieved and warm in her expression, and David felt terrified and exhilarated in equal measure. The first design meeting happened at Margaret's townhouse. David had expected something cold and modern, all glass and steel and uncomfortable furniture. Instead, he found a place that felt hollow despite being expensively decorated. Everything matched. Nothing looked lived in. "I bought it furnished," Margaret said, seeing him look around. "I never changed anything. It seemed like too much work for just me." They spread his initial sketches across her dining table. David had stayed up late 3 nights running, refining the design, trying to balance what he knew about Margaret with what he imagined she might need. Large windows for light, open spaces that could be filled with laughter or left quiet depending on the day. A kitchen designed for actual cooking, not just reheating takeout, a reading nook, a garden space. Margaret studied the drawings in silence. David's palms started to sweat. "You hate it," he said. "No." Her voice was thick. "No, I love it. When I asked you to design a house, I thought you'd give me what I said I wanted. But this is what I actually need." "How did you know?" "You talk about being alone like it's something you chose," David said. "But you look at Emma like you're starving. This house, it's got space for a life bigger than one person. Room to grow into. Does that make sense?" Margaret nodded, not trusting her voice. Emma, who'd been coloring quietly in the corner, came over to look at the drawings. "Where's my room?" "Emma," David said, "this isn't our house." "I know, but Margaret's gonna need a guest room, right? For when people visit?" Margaret looked at Emma, then at David, something vulnerable and hopeful in her expression. "She's right. I should have a guest room. Maybe you could design it with someone Emma's age in mind, just in case." David felt something shift in his chest. This wasn't just about a house anymore. Maybe it never had been. The build took 8 months. David worked harder than he'd ever worked in his life, splitting time between the construction site upstate and Emma's daily needs. Margaret drove up on weekends, bringing lunch for the crew, asking questions, learning the names of everyone on site. She and Emma had become genuine friends. Margaret taught Emma about constellations and took her to museums. Emma taught Margaret about cartoons and convinced her that hot chocolate was a food group. David watched them together and felt something growing that scared him. He couldn't afford to fall in love with Margaret Chen. They lived in different worlds. When the house was done, she'd go back to her life, and he'd go back to his. And Emma would be heartbroken. He would be heartbroken. But he was falling anyway. It happened in small moments. Margaret showing up at Emma's art show, sitting in the back, applauding louder than anyone when Emma's family portrait won 3rd place. Margaret learning to braid hair through patient YouTube tutorials so she could help Emma before a school dance. Margaret asking David's opinion on things that had nothing to do with the house, just because she valued his thoughts. One evening, after a long day on site, Margaret found David sitting on the unfinished porch, watching the sunset. She sat beside him without asking, the way she'd learned to do over months of Saturdays. "Penny for your thoughts," she said. "Thinking about what happens when this is done," David admitted. "The house, when you move in and everything goes back to normal." "What's normal?" "You know what I mean. Saturday mornings were one thing. But this..." He gestured at the house, the intimacy of creating something together. "This isn't real life." Margaret was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "What if it could be?" David looked at her. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying I don't want Saturday mornings to end. I'm saying I wake up excited to see what you've done with the house. I'm saying Emma called me Aunt Margaret last week, and I cried in my car for 20 minutes because it was the best thing anyone's called me in years." She took a shaky breath. "I'm saying I'm in love with you, David Morrison. And I'm terrified because I don't know how to do this, any of this." David's heart was hammering. "You're in love with me?" "Completely, inconveniently, probably unwisely given that I'm your employer and this is all kinds of inappropriate. But yes, I'm in love with you, with both of you really. You and Emma, the life you've built, the way you see the world. I'm in love with your Saturday morning rituals and your terrible jokes and the way you look at your daughter like she hung the moon." "Margaret, you don't have to say anything. I just needed you to know. I needed to be brave enough to say it out loud at least once." David caught her hand. "I'm in love with you too. Have been for weeks, maybe months. I kept telling myself it was impossible. That we're too different. That you'd eventually realize you could do better. Better than a man who builds tree houses for his daughter and designs dream homes that feel like hope. Better than someone who sees me as more than a bank account or a business opportunity. David, you're the best thing that's happened to me in years. You and Emma both." They kissed there on the unfinished porch, surrounded by sawdust and paint cans and the smell of fresh wood. It felt like coming home. The house was finished in late spring. Margaret moved in on a Saturday naturally, with Emma directing the movers and David making sure everything was placed exactly where Margaret wanted it. The guest room had bookshelves David built specifically to Emma's height and a window seat perfect for reading. There was a photo on the nightstand, the 3 of them at the rabbit event, Emma holding Mr. Whiskers, David and Margaret laughing at something she'd said. "Emma's going to love sleeping over," Margaret said, finding David standing in the doorway. "Is that the plan?" "I hope so. I mean, if you're both amenable. Weekends maybe. Or whenever she wants. Whenever you want." David pulled her close. "I think we're amenable." They'd been officially together for 2 months now, taking it slow, figuring out how their lives could fit together without forcing pieces that didn't match. Emma approved enthusiastically. David's ex-wife had been surprised but supportive. Margaret's business partners had been shocked that she was suddenly leaving the office at 5 o'clock and taking whole weekends off, but the company hadn't collapsed without her constant presence, which was its own revelation. That evening, the three of them sat on Margaret's new porch, their porch, she kept insisting, watching fireflies blink in the dusk. Emma was nestled between them, fighting sleep and losing. "Dad?" she said drowsily. "Yeah, sweetheart. Remember when I said Margaret looked lonely at the coffee shop? I remember. I was right, wasn't I? She needed us." David and Margaret exchanged glances over Emma's head. "Yeah, kiddo," David said softly, "but I think we needed her too." Emma smiled, satisfied, and let her eyes close. Margaret rested her head on David's shoulder, her hand finding his in the growing darkness. Above them, the first stars were appearing, and the house stood solid and beautiful behind them, filled with the promise of everything they were becoming together. Somewhere in the distance, an owl called. The wind moved through the trees, and for the first time in longer than she could remember, Margaret Chen felt the opposite of lonely. She felt home.